Is it surprising that October 1926 two main stories come from upstate New York and Montana instead of, say, Chicago? Is that a reflection of the breadth of despair spread throughout the United States as opposed to bank robbery being a centralized issue specific to the Midwest? Welcome to Decades of Heistery, where we cover safecrackers and bank heists from 1926 up until U.S. involvement in World War II. Lovers of local history and the Great Depression and the gangster era will enjoy exploring these prominent heists, at least prominent in October of 1926 in Montana and New York. So we'll break out the Wolf Point Herald newspaper to see that Yeggs have been added again. Safecrackers score failure, attack Frazer Bank, flee when woman operator spreads alarm. Late on the evening, or actually the early morning of Wednesday, October 13th, a crew of an unknown number entered the Farmers and Merchants Bank by climbing in through a back window. They had previously cut the only telephone line wire into town. The Yeggs covered the front windows and set to work on the safe containing the money. Breaking out an acetylene torch, they burned through most of the fuel, the gas, just trying to get through the first door of the safe. Then one of the robbers, acting as a guard, saw that they'd been witnessed by a night telephone operator at the nearby Great Northern Depot. One Mrs. W.E. Haler had already notified by telegraph the towns of Wolf Point and Glasgow. She was in the act of alerting the locals of Frazer when the Yegg on guard duty rounded the corner and witnessed her. He retreated inside the bank and must have alerted his comrades, and then the whole crew just bolted out the door. They left behind the torch and the tank, giving some clues. 1. The tank was nearly empty, meaning they probably couldn't have gotten to the cash in the first place. And 2. The workmanship was lacking. Those 2 points led many to believe that the Yeggs were local. That seems a bit strange to me, because like a strange reflection on the workers of the area at the time, because I would expect in the 1920s many people to be familiar with an acetylene torch. We're talking the 1920s in Montana, in an area that was independent and self-reliant. Well, fortuitously, a freight train ran through Frazer about that time, probably allowing for some or all of the Yeggs to escape. The alarm reached Wolf Point, and 2 cars of police officers and citizens left heading toward Frazer and vicinity. In those cars were Sheriff Anderson, Chief of Police Shamley, officers of unknown rank Frank Bannister, Ed Nickel, Fred Rathert, Al Applegren, and George Flint, along with Deputy Charles Counsel. They split up, with Rathert and Applegren heading northwest to check the Frazer-Luster Road, while Nickel took up a guard position on the Roosevelt Highway. The balance of them headed directly to Frazer itself. Sheriff Rogers of Valley County also headed to the scene of the crime. No word was given of other details, so this attempted heist will move to our follow-up section when more information comes to light. The Douglas Daily Dispatch, Evening Star, and New Britain Herald will provide the details about the arrest of a large postal gang that also didn't shy away from robbing banks. So it appeared that 8 men believed to be a postal and bank robbery gang that had been at it for approximately 8 months in New York, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania, had been shut down after stealing over $1 million. Charles Dean, Frank Nolan, Michael McCabe, and Charles Moffett were arrested at the Cedarhurst Inn in West Sand Lake near Troy, New York, by postal inspectors who described the inn as, quote, a yeggman's hangout, end quote, according to the Evening Star. the four arrested stated that they were salesmen, though when they were arrested they also had burglar tools in their possession. Joseph Blue, Thomas Riley, and Joseph McCarthy were taken, I believe, in New York City, while the last, Joseph Garibaldi, was arrested at his home in Delmar, New York. Postal Inspector Charles H. Clarahan directed the investigation and stated that the robbers had gotten approximately $500,000 in stamps alone throughout New York State, and were also involved in post office and bank robberies in the 3 states that we noted. He said that all 8 of those arrested had previous criminal records. The gang members were described as burners, since they used acetylene torches. Thomas Riley, alias Thomas Stratton, was being held by the United States Commissioner Garrett W. Cotter with a $100,000 bail, pending proceedings that take him all the way back to Los Angeles, California, where he'd been indicted in July of 1923 for mail robbery. The mail robbery actually went back to November 3, 1921, so he'd been at it for a while. Joseph Blue, which was actually an alias for Joseph Cameron, who also went by the names Kid Norton and Joe Collin, was also being held on a $100,000 bond since he'd been charged with prying a lock from a mail truck in Cincinnati, Ohio, way back in March of 1921. So more to come on this gang of 8, hopefully in the near future. But in October we met Yeggs and burners, and saw one way to combat them was the use of flivvers. We saw heists from around the country, sometimes with fatal consequences. All innocents injured or killed will be added to the Memorial Honor Roll, and that cumulative video will come out in December for all those injured or killed during 1926. Gang wars were springing up despite the onset of autumn and the approach of Thanksgiving. The hope is that in November of 1926, all were thankful despite the decaying foundation of the American culture and economy. On to November 1926 to find out. For now, I want to thank you for spending your time with Decades of History. Until next time.